hoping that my microphone is working. Yeah, hey, I'm live. Here I am, everybody. Hello, hello, hello from Crazy Town here in Santa Barbara and on the same planet as you. I thought I would just do this sort of early in the day, middle of the or end of the week thing, so that maybe I could capture a few people from Europe. And maybe if you're getting up very early over there somewhere in Australia or something like that, you'd be able to catch me as well. Because usually these things, you know, we here in the United States have them in the evening, and then it's middle of the night for you, or I have it in the morning here, in which case, you know, nobody from Australia can do it. Anyway, hello, everybody. Elliot here. Hi, William Dillon and Stan and other people I know. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I put a little timeout into the chat. So I put a 15-second delay. There's just something about my expectation of getting trolled today. I sure hope it doesn't happen, but the trolling has been really fierce for me recently. And, you know, it's just been something I've been dealing with on my Twitter or X or whatever it is today. It's something I've been dealing with. And so I want to just put a little delay in the chat. So just in case somebody comes up and wants to really just sort of do a infinite loop of spam, that would let me intervene in time. So I am here to answer your questions today and just join in with whatever chat stuff you want to talk about. That's going to be really up to you. You know, I have my own things to talk about, stories you might like to hear about. So, you know, I guess what the big thing in my world this last week, probably all of you know this, I was on CNN International. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Around 9 a.m. in the morning, I got a email from one of the producers from CNN saying, how would you like to be on later today? And I was like, yeah. And, you know, I was on at 6:45 p.m. that same night. But one of the really great things about it was that they actually asked me for the talking points. What did I want to talk about? And so I sent them those 3 images that I covered. Hi, Beverly. I sent them those 3 images that I covered during the CNN talk. And they wrote back and said, excellent, right? So that was about all I knew about what the interview was going to be. I didn't know any of the questions or anything like that. One of the interesting things I learned, and this might be information for all of you, you know, it looked like I was looking at the person, right? But CNN and maybe other mainstream media does this as well. Obviously, they don't want me to be able to capture, if I were to use some screen capture or a home device, any of the interview that's going on while it's going on. So believe it or not, although my camera was transmitting my image to them, I saw absolutely nothing coming from them to me. Before the show aired, we did a little pre-interview and they said, well, we're going to cover this image and this image and this image. And I said, well, I'll just see them. And they're like, no, you won't see the images. Okay, I need you to repeat those images, please, because I have to try and think of what they were so that when you put them up there, I'm describing the right thing, right? Because they could have put up an elephant and I would have been talking about the North Atlantic sea surface temperatures. I mean, I had no idea what they were showing. And it was not like Skype. It wasn't like Zoom. It was just a blank screen I was talking to with my camera on. That was it, right? So, any rate, I am grateful that it went over as well as it did. I think it made a huge international impact. And I know a lot of climate scientists were kind of pissed at me because of the non-hopeful message. On the other hand, it really seems like something has broken, doesn't it? Like you hear more and more climate scientists and real experts just saying what they think. It's almost like this sense of relief, like we can really... we can say it now, right? It's okay to say it. And so I am really heartened that we're getting so many more honest opinions coming out now from these climate scientists. And it's really I would say that's the most positive thing that came from it. It seems like the conversation has changed. It's no longer Antonio, the UN chief, just saying that the oceans are boiling, which is, he's reaching for metaphors because he's used every metaphor he can already. It's now actual climate scientists who are saying, this is just stunning. This is shocking. Nobody ever expected this. None of the models predicted this. The models predicted the temperature rise very accurately. All right. The temperature rise is pretty much following Hansen's and all of the sort of science that says for this much CO2 or CO2 equivalent, we should expect this much temperature rise. What's not being followed are the consequences of that temperature rise, these 6 standard deviation events that are happening, these mind-blowing anomalies going on right now. So, that's what I've been focused on. Just in my day-to-day, Twitter is just going through data, just agog. I cannot believe what I'm seeing. And I am just thankful that climate scientists out there are saying the same thing. So welcome. Please just put your questions into chat. And I'm going to go to a question from Beverly, which I think is a great question and one that a lot of the deniers who troll me try and mock me for, which is this question: can you explain how scientists can say that July 2023 has or had not possibly had the highest temperature recordings in the last 120,000 years? How do we know this? So there's a lot to that question to unpack, but the first thing is to understand that this is not local temperatures. This is not the temperature in the US or the temperature in Europe. This is not some northern hemisphere temperature. We're talking about global temperatures. And when you take the average globally, that changes very slowly until humans came along or an asteroid hits the planet. Those temperatures change very, very slowly. So that if it's cold, and it's cold because you've done some paleoclimatology that says, hey, it was, we were in the middle of the last ice age, and it was cold, then it wasn't suddenly hot globally for a day, right? There are margins of error, and the margin of error before the Holocene, right? So the Holocene is about 11,700 years ago is when it started. That's the age of man, they call it. Before that, we're coming out of the last ice age, and temperatures were so much colder globally that we can all but take it for granted that every day before 11,700 years ago was colder than anything that we've experienced in July here. The margins of error are just so much smaller than the difference between the temperatures that we know from back then. So we really just have to focus in on the last 11,700 years, which still sounds like a lot of time. But it turns out that when you get that recent, the deltas, the errors become smaller, right? And so the closer you come to the modern day, the smaller those errors become. And so we can actually track temperatures fairly closely through that period of time, through different warming and cold spells, understanding that there is not just going to be suddenly a spike of 20 days coming out of the blue where the planet is hotter, right? If the planet heats up this much, it's because something major happened to the atmosphere, something major happened to the planet, right? It is not just the planet heats. Now, the planet can cool if you have like a volcano, right? But planets just don't heat. So what do we look at then? Well, we look at ice cores and sea sediment cores and tree rings, right? And we're looking at coral reefs, and you're looking at the sediment and what is oxidizing and what sorts of organisms are growing and what isotopes are there, right? And I'm not familiar with that science, but I believe the scientists. And there are some great articles that explain this. If you just go looking for one, Washington Post had a great article on this very question. And essentially what the Washington Post said, they said two things. Number one is that it is a medium confidence conclusion that this July is the warmest period of 30 days in the last 120,000 years. Medium confidence, not high, not low, medium. But then they also say that the only exception happened about 6,000 years ago. That there was a little span of time around 6,000 years ago where temperatures might have exceeded the current state for a very brief time. They don't think so, right? But that's within the margin of error. So when I said it is likely, right, it's with that little caveat in mind that there was this little period of time about 6,000 years ago where maybe, just maybe, temperatures spiked above current values. So, you know, if you really want to investigate it, just look up paleoclimatology, look up the article in the Washington Post. There's other good articles around. And you can really see that there's a lot of science behind this. This is a really well understood period of time. Now, you go back before 120,000 years, right? Then you get a very warm period behind that. And there's no question that was warmer than we are today, right? 125,000 years ago, it was warmer. So we're really just talking about this narrow period of time where there was an ice age, followed by a very, the Holocene, where we have information about modern humans that kind of gives us some clues about what's going on. So hopefully that explains it all to you. If you have any other questions on that, let me know. I'm going to keep going down these things here. Glad to know my mic sounds good. Here's what happened as I was coming on the air, like 1 minute before going on. I said, I better do a mic check. And it turns out my mic wasn't even connected. I'm like, okay, all right, let's see what else we have here. So let's see. Morning from Australia. Hi there. Martha says, just thinking of a bunch of normies hearing it on their TV gave me some anxiety. But I would like more people to know. Yeah, so you're talking about my CNN thing. I know, it's crazy that I got to say we are witnessing the sixth great extinction. We are witnessing the collapse of global industrial civilization. And in response to my saying that in that CNN interview, what the host did not say is, but there's still hope, isn't there? But we can still do something. Green technology is going to fix this, right? We still have, no, he did not try and segue into those sorts of points. Instead, kudos to the host. After I said we're witnessing the sixth great extinction, his response was, humans too? How brilliant is that? How brilliant of the host to not contradict me or try and lead me away, right? But rather just asking the natural question. So thank you, CNN. I mean, really, just an amazing host, an amazing opportunity. And yeah, I'm hoping to get some more of that. So, so grateful. You know, I actually got an email from one of my casino back when somebody who runs a casino that I visited many, many times as a professional. He said, you know, you were in the CNN crawler, right? The crawler, you know, and that's great. I mean, guy, retired professor says that we're witnessing the sixth great extinction. We are, right? I mean, there's no question whatsoever that we are. Let's see. Bruce says, curious if there is a number for the total sea ice volume. And there's all this stuff about sea ice extent, Arctic and Antarctic. Yeah, there is a great site. If you want to know about sea ice volume, I'm going to encourage you. Let's see if I can just bring that up. This is going to be, I have not been switching between things yet, so I'm going to see if I can't switch between this. Hopefully my microphone is working on this channel too. But if you go to this website, it is psc.apl.uw.edu, right? So this is called biomass data. And they actually have charts for Arctic and Antarctic ice extent there. So anything you want to look at as far as research, doing your own research for total ice volume, this is definitely the place to go to look at that. And when I did my own prediction for an over-under for the first blue ocean event, I came up with 2043, by the way. I used biomass volume data as part of that, as one of 3 different metrics that I kind of averaged together to try and figure it out. So this is definitely a site that if you have any interest in seeing volume, having volume questions answered, I would recommend you visit this site. Okay, more questions. Come on. Do we have any theory regarding the record low Antarctic sea ice? Yeah, that is such an excellent question. And you might know that I actually asked that question in my Twitter feed. I said, question to all climate scientists out there, Antarctic specialists. Why is the Antarctic sea ice so low this year? What's going on? Well, I mean, the answer is a little, I don't have an answer that I can just say this is the reason. Like if you look at the North Atlantic sea surface temperatures, you can itemize a list of reasons why those temperatures are so high. And the only question is the ordering of that list, right? But when you look at the Antarctic ice, the question is what is happening down there that could cause this to go so crazy? It's over 6 sigma below, right? Let me show you a picture for those who don't exactly know what I'm talking about. Hang on. I have so many windows open and I only have one monitor, so. All right, so here is Antarctic sea ice extent this year through the date, right? So we are looking at a negative 6.3 sigma based on the most recent 1991 to 2020 sea ice average. And this is brutal, right? This is absolutely brutal. So what's going on? Well, one of the things they say is that this has long been predicted, that sea ice extent was known to be sort of predicted to decline, and that it didn't for many years. And I remember these articles coming out in 2017, 2016 saying, the reason it's not declining is because there's so much melt coming off of Antarctica, and that fresh water there's not enough circulation so that fresh water is staying on the top layer. And fresh water, is lighter than salt water. And so it stays on top. And of course, fresh water freezes at a higher temperature than salt water. It's why you make ice cream with salt water. It freezes at a lower temperature. So we're getting all this sort of freshwater ice, even though we're kind of expected to have less ice. And so, I remember reading those articles, and my climate denier friend, thought, oh, you're just making excuses. But, maybe in retrospect, that's what happened. Maybe, that is part of the reason that we are simply catching up with the place that we always kind of expected to be anyway at this time. I think the Hunga is also a really big cause because that was a southern hemisphere event that threw a tremendous amount of water vapor into the stratosphere, which, as you guys all know, is one of the most powerful greenhouse gases. So no doubt they're getting extra solar radiation going down there. And I would say that you want to just look for some articles on this question. I don't feel like I have the expertise in particular to answer it beyond just pointing to a couple of things that I've heard. But yeah, an excellent question, and I wish I knew more there. All right, here's somebody from my casino world who says, do I think dice control in the game of craps is nonsense? So for those of you who might have gone gambling, you might know my career. My career was math professor, computer science professor and lecturer, then consultant to the gambling and casino industry. I actually have 3 books on casino gambling. And I put them on Amazon for sort of as cheap as Amazon will let me put them up there. So, but my 3rd book was a book about how to beat casino games. And I spent 3.5 years essentially writing about 350 articles on beating every single casino game in as many legal ways as possible. And surely you guys know about blackjack card counting, but there are so many ways that are stronger than blackjack card counting. So my little book, let's go back to me here. Let me just go back. My little book called Advanced Advantage Play, right now has about 175 selected methods printed in it, none of which are dice control, which is when you're playing the game of craps and you think you can beat craps by controlling the dice. And the reason is that beating craps, dice control, as this person asked, do I think it's nonsense? Yes, it is nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. And what we do is we mistake a run of seeming control for actual control. And we mistake the days that we perform badly at craps using so-called dice control as days when our control was just off. Rather than having these just be random events, we're imposing our little paradigm onto these things as if by imposing our paradigm of a day where I had control or I didn't have control, that in fact is a truthful thing to say about what's happening at the table. I know enough about the mechanics of the tables, the physical layouts, the sort of chaos that's put into those dice that there is no such thing as control. Now, there is cheating at craps. And if you look up dice sliding, you'll see people who are quite an expert at controlling dice in an illegal fashion. All right, let's go on. All right, Xmouth Dave. My concern is 3-degree global warming and also the AMOC stopping. What gives me comfort is the potential for carbon capture through technology. Thawing of the permafrost is also a concern. Wow. That's everything there. But let me just say that civilization won't make it to 3 degrees of global warming. We were at 1.2, right? June and July have both been over 1, if you put them together, are over 1.5. So this is what 1.5 is like. Worldwide crop failures, massive flooding events, unprecedented heat waves, this is just a couple months of 1.5. Now, if we're at 1.5, right, if the planet's at 1.5, that means some months will be 1.7 or 1.8, because being at 1.5 doesn't mean every month is at 1.5. It means there's sort of natural give and take due to weather of the average, but the average is 1.5. So trying to imagine a July that is 10% hotter, with respect to the Paris limit than this year already kind of blows me away. So first thing, we're not going to make it to 3.0. I doubt civilization will make it to 2.0. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 is where we're going to hit collapse. As far as the AMOC stopping, so what they actually said, this recent article that just came out, is that there is a 95% confidence interval that the AMOC will stop, hit its tipping point, somewhere between now and the end of the century. It's a lot of years, right? If it doesn't happen in the next 10 years or so, it's kind of inconsequential. It doesn't matter. So, if it does happen, then we're not going to hit 3.0 in any meaningful way, because there's going to be these absolutely frigid temperatures in Europe that's going to completely screw up all of the agriculture and everything, that pretty much sustains life as it is today, all the infrastructure and everything else. So if 3.0 happens, then AMOC doesn't matter. And if AMOC happens, then 3.0 doesn't matter. And what gives you comfort is the potential for carbon capture. That's not going to happen in any meaningful amount either. And thawing of permafrost is also an unknown concern. There's two things. There's permafrost methane, and there's also so-called East Siberian Arctic Sea methane, right? So if you look right up on the sort of northeast coast of Siberia, there is a relatively shallow area off the coast that has essentially on the bottom of the Arctic there is a layer of frozen ice, right? And below that frozen ice is all of these methane clathrates, which are sort of these methane hydrates, this dissolved methane sort of fixed in place in a goo with water. And the concern is that if that layer of frozen ground at the bottom of the East Siberian Arctic Sea thaws, there's going to be this huge methane bomb that comes up from underneath. And there's been a lot of work on that, and some people are saying that that's going to happen very, very soon, and other people are like, well, there's all these other things first. So yeah, we are not in the situation right now where methane from either source, permafrost or ESAS, is really significant. And they know this by isotope studies, because you can actually trace that methane. It has a slightly different isotope characteristic than other types of methane from ordinary anaerobic decay or flatulence or things like that. So the experts pretty much know that that has not happened yet. And let's see, I'm going to just see what's happening here. All right. Let's see. Hi there, environmental. Hi, Sandy from Environmental Coffee House. Hello. Let's see. Why did man ban me? I'm showing data. That's all. Well, I'm not exactly just showing data. In fact, I am a doomer, right? And some people like to call doomers realists. So I am a climate realist, which essentially means that I don't trust humans with our track history of being able to do even close to what's needed to stop collapse from happening. And, I think about that in terms of where I live here in Santa Barbara. I love Santa Barbara, don't get me wrong. It's a city with a very high ecological consciousness, right? We have Earth Day started here because of an oil spill. That's Santa Barbara. So what about Santa Barbara, all right? With all of this consciousness, for the planet. Well, it's a relatively flat city. So you can walk and ride your bike anywhere. We have a health and fitness oriented community. So most people could ride a bike or jog or walk, right? We have infrastructure with lots of sidewalks and places for electric bicycles to go down our streets, and they don't have to feel like they're going to get run over. We have stores everywhere, grocery stores, banks, post office, anything you need within walking distance from pretty much anywhere you live in the city. And with all of that, right, I'm the only person out there walking to pick up their groceries, I see. Maybe once a month, I will see somebody else walking with bags of groceries. Never see people riding their electric bikes with groceries, right? These people with electric bikes don't have racks where they can put their grocery bags. People live right across the street, a busy street from a grocery store, and they drive. I live in a neighborhood with people who are very well off, who are ecologically conscious, who drive. So that's what's happening to the planet. There just isn't the buy-in. Okay, well, I drive my electric vehicle. No, walk, ride a bike. But I have this home solar with Tesla charging that I power my electric vehicle. Right, and they had to mine the lithium and the cobalt, and there's the waste of building it and the waste of disposing of it and all the impacts of making the materials. Walk. So, the future of the planet, if ever there was a prototype for collapse, it's this beautiful, beautiful city of Santa Barbara I live in. So why did man ban me? Well, he bans everyone who disagrees with him. And you can even be an established climate scientist and be on the other side of him, so that, rather than being a doomer, you think, you're too much in favor of something like the Mirror Reflection Project or one of these very hopium-esque solutions. He just bans people. It's just crazy. It's just, and one of the things to do if you're on Twitter or Threads or anywhere is look at Michael Mann's Twitter feeds, and pretty much all you see is self-promotion, right? Self-promoting his books, his talks, his books and his talks, and over and over and over again. So, I wish he didn't ban me. I genuinely wish. Angelica from Buenos Aires, awesome. Don't you think countries' greenhouse gas inventories are reported too late, 1 or 2 years delay, as it is input to react with public policies? I don't know about international public policy, but I do know that there is, maybe their GHGs are reported too late, but there's already fudging. You look at things like offsets, where Germany essentially, by burning wood pellets that they import from the US, is claiming to be 100% renewable. Right, so let's cut down the US forests and leave it up to us to replant those forests so that Germany can be 100% renewable. So, there's so many things that I don't agree with. And now there's this whole thing about greenwashing, right? Where you actually look at all of these companies that set out these programs of greenwashing, of saying how they're reducing their GHGs and so on. And they're all stepping back on their promises, right? I read somewhere recently, it might have been Germany, that there's this huge revolt now, sort of this public outcry against some of these green policies. Why? Because it's making lives harder. It's making things more expensive. It's creating social challenges. And so why did we do that, right? Life was so much easier before we went green. We didn't know it was going to be tough. So that was an article in the last 2 days I read. I wish I remembered more details. Okay, Philip asks, reactions following my CNN interview. Lots and lots and lots of reactions. I love the responses on Twitter. 100, at least 100 people giving me kudos when I posted it. Tons of emails, people reaching out to me. I had 2 climate scientists tell me they did not like me using the phrase climate researcher for the lower third. The lower third is the thing that goes down at the bottom right here. When somebody's talking, that says who they are, what their credentials are. And what happened is that as I was going on to CNN, literally minutes before I'm going on, they said, well, we want to call you a climate researcher. And I'm like, I don't think so. And I remember saying, I said, well, I'm not a climate expert and I'm not a climate scientist, but then I'm not a climate amateur, right? And I'm not a climate hobbyist. So I said to them, I guess climate researcher is okay. I asked this question on Twitter, and next time, if that ever comes up again, my official lower third is going to be climate analyst. And I just sounds right. I'm analyzing. I'm not publishing peer-reviewed journal articles on it. So 2 people mentioned that, and that was a very fair complaint. I also saw over on Threads, I believe, Catherine Hayhoe or maybe it was what's her name, Rebecca. You'll tell me the name. Sultan, I don't remember. Saying that it was just horrible that I said these things and that this was setting the whole climate, agenda back. Right, as if what they're doing so far has worked, right? As if by saying sort of this party line that there's hope or there's agency has actually helped make progress. CO2 in the year 2020 was down 7% from 2019. That was COVID, right? Well, it turns out that to hit the 1.5 Paris target, we essentially needed to reduce by 7% every year in the 2020s. So that 1 year was the first, right? A COVID squared, COVID cubed, right? Reduce another 7% every year for the next decade, we would be on target for 1.5. And I don't disagree with that. That follows Hansen's temperature model. Well, what happened in 2022? We actually had record CO2, right? Record all-time CO2 in 2022. Now, one of the things that's happening because of Antarctica that you might not know about is that there's this whole way that the sea ice is actually a sink for CO2. And by a sink, I mean it helps draw CO2 out of the atmosphere. And there's this sort of consensus now, and I've read a couple articles on this. Not everybody agrees, but it seems like most people agree that one of the impacts of the declining sea ice in Antarctica is the loss of this sink. So essentially, more CO2 going into the atmosphere because of that. Not only that, as the oceans heat up, they're less able to hold gases, right? All gases, oxygen, so the oceans are deoxygenating, but also less CO2. And both of these things contribute to a spike in CO2. And, the thing is that La Nina years tend to have relatively small CO2 rises year over year whenever you have La Nina. So when I did my Climate Casino over-under on CO2, and I set it at 424, I was dead certain that it was going to be under that because it was a La Nina year, right? And I said, there's no way it's going to make it to 424. And because it was at 420.99 the previous year. And there's no way it was going to go up over 3 parts per million in, the last year to its maximum in April of 23. And yet that's what happened, right? It peaked at 424. I nailed it to the 100th of a degree. But I didn't think so. I thought I was going to win that bet, and it was going to be way under 23.5 or something, 423.5 or something. And thinking back, the reason for that, now sort of logically occurs to me that it was the open ocean, extra open ocean due to the loss of Antarctic sea ice and the preliminary heating of the North Atlantic that was already going on. And if you go to NOAA and you look at the recent CO2 levels, let me see if I can bring this up for you. It's kind of marginally interesting. So hang on a second, all right? I'm going to actually go to this website. I never know what I'm going to do, but hopefully this will entertain you for a moment here. All right, here we are where we can look at some CO2. So, trends in CO2. And look at this huge spike that we have here. I mean, this is like nothing we have not seen this before, this sort of huge spike. And look, normally from this point right here, the next month is a big drop. And I don't know, I hope you can see my mouse here. Let me just see whether you can see my mouse as I'm doing this. I have to check this out. So unfortunately, there's a little bit of lag time here. All right, no, you can't see my mouse. But at any rate, if you look at the left-hand picture there, you notice that we have that huge jump, right? And then we have like this little V, upside-down V at the top. The month after that should be a huge decline, right? We're expecting a huge decline from whatever it was, high 423s. It should drop like 2 or 3 points. But if we actually look at the day's values, the day-to-day values from just this last month, look at those things in the mid-high 422s, right? And it's just not going down the way that you would expect it to, the CO2. So I think we're going to have a big spike in CO2 happening as well. That's just another consequence of this changing, these anomalies that's going on. All right, I've kind of talked a little bit too much there about things that go away. How much standard deviation are the Antarctic right now? 3.3 sigma. Would a hot North Atlantic impact the Arctic later this year? Well, you may know that the Arctic overall just hit a record high temperature, right? There is just an all-time record high for the Arctic, like 46 degrees or something like that, right? Which the average temperature for the entire Arctic region. So, I'm expecting a big increase in melt, but as of this moment, Arctic sea ice extent ranks 15th, right? Since they've been keeping records. I forget whether it started in 79 or 82. It ranks 15th. They're just not melting very fast this year. But I expect that to pick up now that, there's this huge temperature spike right at the hottest time of year up there, together with the encroaching, just look at the ocean temperatures off of the northeast part of North America and the western part of Greenland. It's just brutally hot ocean temperatures. So some of that has to make its way into the Arctic. So I think we're going to come down quite a bit, but right now, Arctic ice is it's not an interesting story this year, and that's why I've almost never been posting it. I don't understand your question, custom RC pilot one. So let's ask what Martin Alexander, the Martin Alexander Show. Hi, Martin Alexander Show. Hello from SD, which I think might mean South Dakota. I don't know. With the record low sea ice, Antarctic, and record high ocean temperatures, mainly northern hemisphere, once El Nino passes, how high a baseline will it return to? So we are in a totally chaotic moment right here as far as Antarctic sea ice. So I want to show you a picture that I think really tells a lot about the future of Antarctic sea ice and standard deviation. And it's this picture right here. So you're probably all familiar with my anomaly graph, where essentially what I do is I zero out, and I actually see I have to move this line. Hang on a second. I keep on changing the axes and I have to reset lines to make it work. So these anomalies are the difference from the 1991 to 2020 mean. And the red line is this year, right? So what you notice is in the middle of the year, in general, the sea ice extents are in a narrower band of outcomes than in the summer seasons, right? So right now it's midwinter in Antarctica. So the sea ice extent is sort of in a narrower band through typically through this time of year, whereas during their summers you tend to have more variation in terms of how much sea ice there is. So what that means is that the standard deviation for the sea ice is actually quite small right now. So it's kind of easy to get a 6 sigma event, much more so than it will be in just about 2 or 3 months. So look at that green line about 3 months from now. You see how that 6 sigma line completely falls off, and there's no way that sea ice extent is going to stay under that green line for the rest of the year. So we're going to have a huge recovery from a statistical point of view. We are at a unique moment statistically right now. But, that unique statistical moment is also really a dramatic event. So from a statistical point of view, I expect a recovery to 3 or 4 standard deviations over the next couple months in Antarctic sea ice extent. From a pure, how much sea ice is there kind of picture, I expect us to stay significantly below the sort of standard that we've had over the years, right? These other white lines. But staying below that, right, does not mean that you're going to be 6 standard deviations. So, my prediction is I would take the over. I put the Climate Casino as a bet on 15.5 million square kilometers. I'm thinking it's probably going to be something like 16.5 when we hit that peak. But that's still going to be far, far below the median, but it might only be 4 standard deviations by then. So this is just a moment in time, is what I'm kind of trying to express, where we're having these extreme standard deviations, these extraordinary standard deviations. Let's see, let me fade back here. How curious, it shows my mouse. Oh, I see, it shows it here. It's so weird. Yuki fan says, I don't know anything about gambling. So I think Environmental Coffee House is going to have a show today. Usually you have one on Fridays that start at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Look for Environmental Coffee House on YouTube. If you follow them on Twitter, go visit their show today. All right. They almost always have a Friday show. So let's see. They're going to have oceanographer Jim Massa on there. Now, I actually had a conversation with someone just yesterday online. This very bright young man who is fascinated by the impacts of microplastics and whether, obviously they have a devastating impact on sea life and the environment in general, but do they actually impact the climate? And, if you sort of think of doing an experiment, let's just take some water in a closed environment, right? And shine a light on that water and see it rated heats. And now let's add some microplastics in a certain well-measured amount to that water and shine a light and see how fast it heats and see if there's a difference. I mean, that's essentially how they figured out that CO2 warms the atmosphere. It's the same type of experiment. Well, probably if you put enough microplastics in there, it would warm. But, we do not have microplastics at 0.04% in the ocean, right? The same as CO2. It's much, much less. And so I asked this question actually in a direct message to Jim Massa, and he came up with a brilliant answer. He said it was a very interesting question, whether microplastics actually lead to heating or not. And what he said is that there's actually been a lot of discussion of this lately. But the mechanism is that fish that ingest a lot of microplastics through their lifetimes tend to be more buoyant because plastic floats, right? And if they're more buoyant, then what happens is that they tend to, as they die and decay, rather than sort of settling to the ocean floor, they tend to stay at the surface or near to the surface. And so the natural decay from them that generates greenhouse gases, those gases are more likely to be released into the atmosphere. And so there is certainly going to be some outgassing that, it's just a crazy pathway. I don't know how it can, but apparently that's some late-breaking research right there, which I just find fascinating. So yes, microplastics, in a strange way, microplastics in the ocean are leading to enhanced global warming. Now, I have completely lost track of where I was as far as the chat. Let's just see what's going on here. Okay, Mommy Peralta Ramos says, in Argentina, our Met service predicts up to 3 months forecast. If there's any lab working on any tech or AI innovation to build a climate model that can forecast 1 year cycle or more. I mean, there are long-range forecasts. NOAA has those, GFS. I'm sure the Europeans have those. I mean, they're just sort of general. We expect it to be warmer than average, cooler than average. And they're based on, if you have a La Nina or El Nino or some other oscillation going on that you can track and it has sort of typical impacts on the climate, then you can sort of forecast those impacts well in advance. Now, Argentina, of all the places on the planet, has had some of the most brutally hot weather the last couple of years. And, if you sort of troll Climate Reanalyzer and Tropical Tidbits and other places where this sort of information is published, in a way that's really easy to sort of click around, Argentina has just been brutal there. So hats off to you for doing anything you can there to help them in Argentina. Rudy Zavedno says life is a loser's game. By the way, losers, LOSERS, no one beats death in the end. No one is 2 words, N-O space O-N-E. Not that I'm a grammar Nazi or anything. One of my favorite phrases about that comment is kind of a similar thing, is that fear of death, right? This is really a fear of death statement that Rudy made. Fear of death is not the same as love of life. And so the quote goes, fear of death is not love of life and will not save you. So fearing death doesn't save you. I'm not sure loving life does, but fear of death does nothing for you. So, I tend to not want to spend my life focusing on that a lot. Ian Dillon, you're finally here. Yeah, you missed most of the show. Yeah. Well, finally you caught a show. So good. So ask me a question, Ian. So Jimmy asked a very good question. What about the argument the goalposts were moved, Prof? That's a really good question. And let me just say what that question is. If I were to use my psychic powers to peer into that question. Up through, I may get this wrong, the third IPCC report, the baseline they used was 1750. And if you actually read the text, they say the 30-year period surrounding 1750. So that when we talk about having a Paris limit of 1.5, if you were to use the 1750 baseline, some people like to make the argument that we're already way past 1.5 and we might even be past 2 if you use the 1750 baseline. Well, come IPCC 5, right? By that time, they're definitely using 1850 to 1900. And what's the reasoning? Well, the reasoning is that 1850 to 1900, they were making robust worldwide climatological record keeping. So that with a very small margin of error, you could pretty much say what global temperatures are back to that period, 1850 to 1900. But if you go from that period back to 1750, then you already have an error bar of plus or minus 0.2 degrees Celsius. And so do we want, to permanently have an error bar of plus or minus 0.2? I mean, that's a huge error bar, right? Because if we're at 1.5 today in the month of July, that means we're really anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7. I mean, I much prefer to be able to say we are 1.56 C in the month of July 2023 than saying we're somewhere between 1.36 and 1.76. So, yeah, the goalposts were moved, but they weren't moved to try and hide something. They were moved to try and be able to say things with the accuracy that modern science requires to try and make robust conclusions about the evolution of the climate. So what you find then is a whole bunch of research has been done. I mean, a lot of research on from 1750 baseline to the 1850 to 1900 baseline. How much global warming was there, right? And in the 6th assessment report, they actually quantify that. They say it is 0.1 C of warming plus or minus 0.2 C. Okay, so how much warming from 1750 baseline to the 1850 to 1900s? Somewhere between it actually cooling by 1/10 of a degree and warming by 0.3 Celsius. Okay, if you want to call that moving the goalposts, that's what you can call it. I call it just being sensible. Now that question also addresses like this other thing, like, El Niños, right? Switch from, there's a switch between, the direction of certain wind currents and the hot water goes in one direction or the other. But obviously the Pacific Ocean has been warming, right? Year after year after year. So the La Nina from 2022 was warmer than the El Nino in 1997. So what do you actually have to do? You have to measure the delta, right? How much is it changing from cold to warm? Rather than is it simply cold or is it simply warm? And so in determining whether there's an El Nino or not, average sea surface temperatures are recalculated every 5 years. So that, you want to talk about moving the goalposts. Well, if you didn't move them, you wouldn't know that we were ever in anything but a permanent El Nino right now, right? So it's necessary as well in certain situations. So excellent question. Thank you. So what do you think? It's been an hour already. Can you believe that? I can go a little longer. We have a nice viewership here, and you're asking great questions. When will we see societal collapse and massive human die-off? My bet. Well, there are certain places where if you live there, society is already collapsing. I think parts of Pakistan, southern India, Horn of Africa, there are places where society is very challenged already. And the question is how fast till it gets to your hometown. Well, if you lived in Paradise, California, or, just look on the nightly weather for the latest weather incident that devastated, or if you're in southern Florida where all the coral is dying and in essence is happening everywhere already. First world countries will be the last to go, African countries, Middle East, places where it's brutally hot. And what's my over-under on a human die-off? I actually have this as a wager in the climate casino. An over-under of 8 billion people in the year 2025. That's a small number, right? That already means that, humanity is no longer growing if we're at 8 billion 2 years from now. But more critically, if you look at population models, they all say we'll peak somewhere between 9.5 and 10.5 billion somewhere late in this century. My over-under, somewhere in the period of 2050 to 2060, is 4 billion. So when you ask about a die-off, I mean, me as a doomer, I think that we're well into overshoot, and that collapse is ongoing and will accelerate, and that we're going to see massive human die-offs in the next 30 years. Not extinction, but great, great, great human suffering, and that is an incredibly sad thing. But I cannot see how that's avoidable at this moment. Sandy on Environmental Coffee House says, will you be making appearances on smaller channels since CNN? I'm not being snarky. After I interviewed Peter Kalmus, he said he was looking for bigger venues when I asked him back. I'm not looking for any venues at all. If people reach out to me, I'll pretty much say yes. Even if it's Joe Rogan, even if it's Fox News, I'll say yes. I feel comfortable with my scope of knowledge. It's not encyclopedic, but it's sufficient to have knowledgeable conversations with most people. And I do already have one show lined up in mid-August, but I'm not going to mention what it is quite yet because things change. That should be pretty good. So we'll just see. I after my CNN, I think the question is, how much blowback did CNN get behind the scenes that I don't know about, that we don't know about, right? Because obviously there were a bunch of pissed off climate scientists and people working on all sorts of technologies that are supposed to save the planet that were probably very unhappy and expressed their dissatisfaction with my interview to CNN. On the other hand, I'm just guessing that CNN got more clicks on that particular little news spot than they get on most of them outside of some celebrity sex scandal. So, it's all about clicks for them, right? I mean, they want clicks. As long as the person isn't obviously, mentally ill, they'll ask them back. So I'm open to, come calling. Hey, Rachel, come calling, Rachel. I'd love to be on the Rachel Maddow show. From India. Oh, wow. I love how international this particular group is. I mean, I love that this particular time is getting such great feedback. And thank you for the hearts who's ever giving those. I really appreciate that as well. So, greetings from India. Do you think we'll be able to reach a critical mass of people waking up to the reality of collapse? No. Do you think, and not necessarily to avert collapse? No, we won't. I mean, we're in the process of collapse, and, look what's happening on the planet right now today, right? We have 6 Sigma event in Antarctica, boiling temperature, not boiling, okay, Antonio Guterres says it's boiling in the North Atlantic. We have record global temperatures on day 25 of all time, record global temperatures, at least in the last 100,000 years. And people are still driving their cars to the grocery store here in Santa Barbara. So no. And it's really sad. I mean, it's terribly sad that our species is this, has this sort of bias, this normalcy bias, normalcy bias. What is normalcy bias? It means that we expect the future to resemble the past. We are predisposed to believe that whatever is coming will be like what we've experienced already. Which is why when these hot temperatures happen in Texas or in Phoenix, the deniers are saying, well, it's just summer. It's because they're not remembering the past. They are projecting onto the past the present because they expect the present to be like the past. Normalcy bias, right? Normalcy bias is like this story of what happened when Columbus first landed in the Americas. And the story, this is apocryphal, that there was some... nobody could see the ships coming, right? None of the Native Americans could physically see those ships because they'd never seen anything like it before, right? So they would look out at the ocean and they didn't see anything. And the person who noticed the ships was the medicine man, the seer, right? Who was trained, to perceive outside of normalcy bias. And that person was able to say, they're coming, and still people couldn't see them. And that's where we are, right? We are on a planet now with climate scientists and the leader of the UN and any number of doomers with YouTube channels and other people saying, it's coming, right? Like pointing to those ships that are just right there on the horizon, it's coming. And people are saying, no, I'm going to go drive my car to go grocery shopping, even though the grocery store is across the street. So, that's the sorry position we are in. And so with respect to India, no. Yeah. I don't know how to say your name, whether it's Rudel or Rudy Zavedno. I just don't know how to pronounce that. But you make the entirely accurate point that an AMOC collapse would freeze Europe and cook Southern Africa. So essentially what happens is with the AMOC, all of that cold water meltwater from Greenland, right? It's making a really cool spot right there. And all of that Gulf Stream sort of coming up, right, is trying to bang into that. And if the system collapses, then essentially none of that Gulf Stream is going to be able to make it through, which means it's all going to pile up. All that hot water is going to start piling up, exactly how it's doing today, actually. And it's not going to be able to make it there, which means we would have this huge heating in certain parts of the Americas. Whereas Europe is just going to not get any of that warmth. And so they're going to just take the full brunt of the cold that's now being released on them. So yeah, exactly right. Tennessee Jed asks, Elliot, do you watch Nate Hagen's? I've watched a total of 5 minutes of Nate Hagen's, and so many people have asked me, do I watch Nate Hagen's? I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't have any particularly negative opinion of the man to share. I just can't watch him. I've tried 2 or 3 times, and I turn it on for a minute or two, and it's like, so let's see where else we are. Beverly says, as a resident of Northern California and I live in a flood zone, I'm concerned about ArcStorm 2.0. Do we know the odds in any given year of this event? I don't know the odds, Beverly. That's a really good question. But what I do know is that this next El Nino winter that we're coming into has that potential. So here in California, we get these atmospheric rivers that come through. And when the atmospheric river is here, just dumps on us, right? Just dumps day after day after day of incredible rainfall rates. And we saw that in the middle of a La Nina year, right, this year. I mean, that's how crazy it is that we had this rain in a La Nina year. So if you were to go from La Nina to El Nino and scale up the rain from last year to a normal increase from a La Nina year to an El Nino year, then yeah, we are going to be essentially one of these once in a millennia storm that just floods California, How come I'm so bad at names. Let me look up who Wallace Broker is. I just watched a YouTube on, and I'm just wondering whether that's the same person. All right, I just don't know him much about him. I'm reading about him right now. I'll have to read more about this person. That I'm going to set that one aside for myself for later reading. That sounds very interesting to me. Yeah, okay. Diego McCall says David Ho has a recent paper in Nature arguing that carbon capture is a fantasy at best. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, just the little bit I know about it is just the magnitude of scaling up to have it make a difference is just beyond anything that we're going to be capable of in any timely fashion. Let's see what else. They say Wally. All right, I'm looking forward to reading about this person. I can't believe I don't know everything. So I already talked about Madrugada. I already spoke about the cloth rates. That's certainly true, right? These methane hydrates off the East Siberian Arctic Sea are sitting there, right? Could go off, could happen this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years. What it really takes to have that happen is a lot of direct warming of the open Arctic Ocean, which means you need to have a couple of low ice years in a row with. Now, here's the problem, that there's actually this feedback that's happening in the Arctic, that as the ice is melting, it's getting kind of replaced with fog a lot. And, ice reflects incoming solar radiation, but fog is also white, and so it reflects a fair amount. To really have a strong impact on the cloth rates, you need a lot of warmer water in that part of the Arctic. And there's been a couple years where it's been warmer up there if you sort of follow the maps through the season. But I think that will follow a blue ocean event and not precede it. So I would say if we're going to get, a substantial release of methane, probably mid-late 2030s, early 2040s before, in my mind, that becomes something that we might have to worry about. Right now, it's just not a significant source of methane, the methane cloth rates. Okay, my throat is starting to get a little bit strange. What I really appreciate is that there's no trolls. I haven't gotten any trolls here yet. So thank you for not being trolls. Andre says it's all about the money. Are you a troll, Andre? Maybe Andre's a troll. So let's see what else is up here. Yuki Fawn says he's going to look up what blackjack card counting is. I got to just show you. So this is my book on blackjack. It's called The Blackjack Zone, Lessons in Winning on Blackjack in Life. And it is the only blackjack book that actually is also a self-help book, how to win at blackjack and how to use the sort of metaphoric lessons as you learn the game of blackjack to do better in life. And then this very technical book that you don't care about at all. This is a book on how you actually design games that go in casinos. So I wrote this as a casino industry book. It's definitely an insider book. Let me just show you one more. And this is my book on how to beat every casino game called Advanced Advantage Play. Kind of thick, right? Like 500 pages. And it's just full of graphs and charts and all that kind of stuff. So I go through all sorts of games and how to beat them. So that's my casino life. I retired from the casino industry in 2017. Here's the thing for me. There's three things I love in life, right? I love mathematics, games, and computer programming, right? Those are sort of my three things, right? And it turns out when you put those all together, the profession that pointed to is the casino industry, because casino games are mathematically based. You have to write computer programs to analyze them, and they're games. I mean, the problem with my career is that it was the casino industry. Not my favorite industry. I love some of the people in the industry, but the actual sort of underlying moral principle of, it's not much different than alcohol or cigarettes or porn or, sort of other exploitative industries that exist because of people's addictions. I'm not sure porn fits in there. But, so not happy. I actually saw a psychologist, to try and help me deal with some of the conflicts I had about working in the industry. And my psychologist said something really interesting to me. She said, I have a client who works for Raytheon, helping to design drones, right? These drones, guided drones that deliver bombs, lethal weapons. That person's conflicted, right? That person's conflicted about their job. You know. I mean, they were putting my complaint in perspective, and I really greatly appreciated that. It helped me get through about 2 more years. All right. Let's see where we are. Yeah, I am just enjoying your comments here. Climate analyst, all right, thank you, yes. If I had only one fake dollar to bet on chaos, on a chaos year, which one would I choose? 2024. I'm going to put $100 on 2024 right now. Absolutely, 2024. I mean, we're just getting started this year. I mean, we have a full year of El Nino next year. 2024. All right, let's see what else. Hi from Belgium. I love that I'm getting such an international group. Thank you so much. Thank you. So according to a poll here, climate change is people's 10th worry. Their first is immigration. Well, if you look at, I actually, on my blog, which is climatecasino.net, I have an article which is the top 40 impacts from climate change. And let me just show you that article, because I think it's a very important article. And this is when I first got onto Twitter. One of the very first things I ever did on Twitter back, 2020 when I joined, was to inquire from the Twitter hive mind, what are the major impacts from climate change, right? What are they? And I got a list of about 75 things, from which I've actually chosen for this particular article, 40 of them, the top 40. And if you look at, let me see if I have immigration in here. I don't have immigration in this. I can't believe it. I'm not listing immigration as one of the top 40. All right. That wasn't so smart of me, huh? Now I do have more. The full list of them. It's in this article called The Great Climate Change Crisis Convergence. And so do I not have immigration? How can I not have immigration? I know I have it somewhere. I don't know why I don't have that. Embarrassing. I was sure it was in here. Somebody find it, because I know it's in here. Climate refugees. All right, that's it. I didn't call it immigration. I called it climate refugees. So it actually is in the other article as well. Good one, Elliot. They're climate refugees. Yes, here they are. Number 5, climate refugees and migration. So this is one of the top issues, top things that's happening, right? Once some part in northern Africa becomes inhospitable, once Italy, right, becomes inhospitable, once Greece becomes inhospitable, where do these people go? I mean, this is Europe, right? Well, let's just close the borders and let them die there. No, they're going to try and get in. So this is one of the first huge issues that is a signal of impending collapse. And, the U.S. has been dealing with that now for a long time. Like most of the migrants that come in from our southern border are not coming in anymore because of some war like there was back with El Salvador and Nicaragua, some civil wars, right? They're coming here because they're starving, they're overheated, there's nothing they can, there's nothing left for them in their homeland. And they're just trying to find any place to live that's habitable, right? Where that will take them in. climate refugees are the major source of refugees we get in this country now through our southern border. So, I think this is a sign of just how mean-spirited and god-awful people are, that we are not freely accepting refugees into our countries, all countries, right? This one world, and if we happen to have a country that has more resources just by the grace of God, that we were born here, the grace of the great spaghetti monster, we were born here, then, we don't have any more rights to these resources than somebody from sub-Saharan Africa or Italy, or it's just a fluke of birthplace. And this idea that somehow we have the rights and privileges to resources on the planet by virtue of our place of birth is an absurdity to me. So, I am so pro-immigration, and it's so sad that this is an issue where so many countries are doing their best to close their borders, including our own president, Biden, right now, has tried to close the borders here. I should go back to full screen me. So, Sandy, love you too. Love you too. All right, let's just see where I am here. I am at least a half an hour behind in the questions I could see. I'm so sorry, everybody, for not getting to your questions. Let me skip way ahead towards the end. I'm sorry for skipping like a half an hour of your questions. I just get going on something. So let's see. Do I think cloud brightening and geoengineering in order to halt Arctic sea ice loss is doable in real life? Yes, absolutely, it's doable. I would say Arctic sea ice loss is not the biggest problem right now. And I would say that Antarctic sea ice loss is a lot further away from, a place that you can fly planes to. So that one is much bigger. Of course, if we have a blue ocean event, then that's going to cause rapid heating of the entire planet. So you want to kind of prevent that. But, you don't prevent something that's not really happening anyway. So, and I also think this feedback loop, right, which I just read about last year for the first time, is really worthy of more investigation before going with some, cloud seeding to cause cloud brightening. Because if we're getting this ground fog effect, that is a feedback loop, right? The more ice that melts, the more fog you get. So essentially what's happening is we are not exchanging ice for open, dark water that is changing the albedo and warming faster, because that, dark water is being covered with fog. And so it's reflecting. So yes, we might lose the ice, but we won't lose the albedo. And if we're not losing the albedo, then we're not going to have that direct warming effect of the Arctic that has everybody so panicked, right? That thinking that the blue ocean event is going to be the end of civilization and life on Earth because of this rapid heating within a decade that's going to blow us all out of the water. That might not happen. And so that was a very interesting paper to read about. Oh, thank you. Andre is not a troll. He's a regular with you. Okay, cool. Good to know. I get so many trolls that I just instinctively want to block people these days. And about once a day, I get an email from somebody saying, I'm not a troll. Really, I'm not. Please unblock me. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Whiskey does work at throat pain numbing. It's too early in the day for whiskey, so I just have coffee, which is, by the way, almost doubled in price in the last couple months. From Western Middle Tennessee, 35C, 46 humidity. That sounds miserable, Patrick. That sounds absolutely miserable. All right, let's see what else we have here. So Nadia asks, because when I said 2024, presumably Northern Hemisphere summer of 24. Well, the Southern Hemisphere, Australia is going to get it this coming summer for them, which, starts in December. They're going to have bushfires and heat waves and, because we have El Nino and that's what happens to them. The only question is it going to be crazy, more worse than it's ever been for them because they've had some really bad years recently. I'm so sorry for the koala in Australia. Oh my God, it's just so sad what's happened to the koala there. Just, just such a sad. Yeah, Australia is just a challenging country for so many reasons. All right, let's see what else do we have. I'm getting towards the end. You can hear it, and I appreciate that you guys are. Atheist Batman says, "Am I worried about immigrants or immigrating?" I welcome immigrants, and I'm not immigrating because, where am I going to go? I'm not going to go to Canada, and here's why: they have boreal forests there that are all going to burn down. Not to mention, record being close to the Arctic Circle, they're warming 4 times the speed of the rest of the planet. Canada is definitely not a place anybody wants to go to try and escape, what's coming. Number one place on the planet, apparently is Tasmania. So anybody looking for a place, I'm sure the Tasmanians will just welcome you right in. So let's see. What are my thoughts on Mir as a viable solution? I was one of the first people to make a donation to Mir. I think it's a viable solution. It's had years and years already of being exposed out there in the public, and it's almost nobody knows what it is or understands, or is catching on. So it's like a lot of these solutions, unless at COP28, the Conference of Parties, they get together and say, let's all use the Mir, framework, and let's all donate $1 billion to it. Unless something like that happens, it's just not happening, right? So it's nice to dream about, right, as a viable geoengineering solution. But in practice, not going to happen. All right, let's see. Food and potable water will be the next gold and silver eventually, in many places already. I'm sort of scrolling through because I'm definitely getting to the end. All right, Sam was the last journalist to interview Wally Broker. I will have to look up that interview. If you're saying that Sam Mitchell interviewed Wally Broker for Collapse Chronicles, I definitely have to look up Wally Broker. I feel like I am behind the curve on that name. Yeah, I'm behind the curve on that name. I live in Tasmania, says Hey Jude. Should we all move there, Hey Jude? I'm sure you're going to say no. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just ending now. I've actually kind of reached my tipping point where, I've been speaking for an hour and a half straight. You guys have been great. I'm so happy I didn't get trolled today. Thank you for your great questions, just one after another great questions. I know I skipped at least a half an hour's worth of questions in there just to take the last couple that came up. So I will have another one of these soon. I'm going to try and have one a month. It's been 5 weeks, this one. So I'm still going to try and have one a month. And so, in the meantime, just thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating in the comments, asking such great questions, being so supportive on social media. Thank you for educating yourself, for spreading the knowledge you have, for asking the right questions. Be an environmental activist, okay? Be an activist. But don't be an activist who is focused on saving humanity. Be an activist that's focused on saving the environment. Be an environmental activist. The one thing we want to do is protect the environment. All actions we take at this point, my opinion, should be actions to preserve and protect the environment. That's what we want to save. So that's my closing message to you all. Again, just thank you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.